Need I remind us that no country, however rich, can afford to waste its youthful energy and exuberance, its most important human resource. The demoralization caused by vast unemployment in our country continues to be the greatest threat to our social order, and morally it's simply unacceptable, and it is a menace that we must deal with it. Because let's face it, beyond the financial costs to society, it leads to physical and mental health of our young people, while acting as a precursor to social breakdown and disorder. It is absurd, and very absurd indeed, when increasingly unemployment continues to be of vital importance, but only to the unemployed. I would want to remind those in leadership that the quality of a society depends on how it takes care of its unemployed, and especially the young people. So let me be clear on this matter of youth unemployment. We are not asking for handouts. We are not asking for tokenisms or for tokens. What we are asking for is for an enabling environment. We are asking for opportunities. We are asking for quality education. And yes, we are asking for jobs. And that is not too much to ask for. It is an open secret, ladies and gentlemen, that the youth cannot access opportunity without income or safety nets to pursue them. It's on the backdrop of that realization that we, the United Green Movement Youth League, on behalf of the Kenyan youth, petitioned Parliament to provide a minimum social safety net, social assistance of 20,000 for every unemployed graduate, and cash for work schemes for the unskilled youth. And here's my piece of advice to every young person who's listening to me. As your legislators start trooping back kwa ground, it is time that we start holding them to account. And listen, whoever comes with excuses, it is self-accusing, and they must be excused on the grounds of gross incompetence. And this leads me to my remarks on voter registration. To exercise this democratic right, I encourage you, my fellow young people, to turn out en masse and register to vote. Your vote, our vote, is our voice. If you do not register to vote and do not vote, you lose the right to complain. If you and I can arm ourselves with a vote, if we can speak amongst ourselves as young people in this country, then I have no doubt that in the coming election we can come together and vote for leaders who are committed to our future. Yes, the power of we the people, especially we the young people, is more powerful than the people rather in power. Fellow young people, our possibilities are endless. Thank you very much, and with those few remarks, it is now
our press statement today as leadership is entitled, "The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission should find innovative ways to register youth in Kenya without identity cards, as well as Kenyans in diaspora." You know, the United Green Movement Party has a 5-pillar manifesto. Amongst them, youth unemployment, environment, economy, rule of law, social justice and equality. And my colleague Moses has spoken honorably about the work that the United Green Movement Party has done with regard to youth unemployment. And to that effect, the United Green Movement Party did petition the House of Parliament on the 7th of July. Moses and Honorable Sialo did lead that particular delegation. And like we promised, we will be going back to the House of Parliament in the month of November to ask the House of Parliament how far they have moved with regard to the effects of our petition. But now, As a rule of law issue, we'd like to laud the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission that has today, the 4th of October, commenced a process which could be the final stretch of mass voter registration before the August 2022 general elections. We know as a party that the voter registration in accordance with Section 5 of the Election Act is supposed to be carried out at all times. But however, this mass voter registration enables the creation of awareness and the voter-related education to be conducted en masse. So I think it's a laudable thing. As part of the IBC mandate, they're supposed to be ensuring that continuous voter education and this kind of exercises happen. So the mass voter registration that the IBC has launched today is going to give them that particular podium to engage in voter education. Now, the United Government Party notes that even though the IBC has launched this important exercise today, there are two categories of persons who are going to be disadvantaged, disenfranchised, and consequently have their civic and political rights violated. And this category of persons include youth in Kenya who, out of no mistake of their own, have been denied identification cards or passports despite the fact that they're registered as Kenyan citizens. And the second category of persons who are going to be disenfranchised are Kenyans living in diaspora. Our reading of Section 9 of the Registration of Persons Act, Cap 107 Laws of Kenya, states that, and we quote, registration officer shall within a period of 30 days from the registration issue an identity card, end of quote. This registration is supposed to be done in accordance with Section 5 of the said Act, which requires the entry of certain details of the person, including a registration number. Now, the only requirement for persons to be registered is that you need to satisfy the provisions of Section 5 of the Registration of Persons Act, which says that you need to tell them where you come from, your address, your lineage, and things like that. So that any Kenyan 18 years and above has satisfied those particular requirements, the Section 9 of the Registration of Persons Act compels the Registrar of Persons to issue them with an identification card. And despite these specific provisions of the law, there are thousands of Kenyan youth who have not been issued with this card several years after the registration. I mean, the United Government Party just did a tour of Garissa County, Tana River, Lamu, and with this week headed towards the Western Kenya. The cries here from young people is that despite the fact that they've been registered within the meaning of Section 5 of the Registration of Persons Act, some government officials are still sitting on the identity cards for reasons that cannot be explained. So the United Government Party would like to state that the act of retaining identity cards or issuance of the same after a period of 30 days of registration, as is the case, apart from breaking this law that is very clear, is also a flagrant violation of Article 12, 1B of the Constitution of Kenya, which states that, and we quote, every citizen is entitled to a Kenyan passport and a document of registration or identification issued by state officers, end of quote. And you know, the Constitution goes further to state that it's an act of Parliament which is made in line with Article 24 of the Constitution on the limitation of rights, which can deny someone from being given an identification card. And in our reading of the law as United Government Party, there has been no law that has limited the issuance of identity cards to young people of Kenya. So for the country to perpetually violate the rights of young people in regard to issuance of identity card is not only a violation of the right to civic and political rights within the meaning of Article 37 of the Constitution, but also a violation of their citizenship rights within the meaning of Article 12. Further, the non-issuance of identity card also has a direct causal link with youth unemployment. And you remember my colleague, Honorable Moses Geshu, has spoken very well to the problems and travails of the Kenyan young people with regard to unemployment. We know that in Kenya, it is impossible to even get a casual job, enter into a public learning institution, open a bank account for self-entrepreneurship or anything that puts you on the job pathway without an identification card. So consequently, the refusal on an issuance of the identity card, apart from being a violation of the civic and political rights, apart from being a violation of the citizenship right under the Constitution Article 12, is also a violation of the right to employment of the Kenyan young people. So we think the government cannot go over simple administrative actions to intervene on little things like printing and issuing an identification card, Yet they promise to create jobs and grow the economy to help the young people find employment, which are complex activities that need some thought and political goodwill. How or why should the young people of Kenya trust this cadre of people with their future? So we really think the urge that we want to ask and send to young people of Kenya today is, number one, please go out and register to vote. Having registered to vote, remember that your vote counts and that you cannot then use it to elect this cadre of leaders that would not care about you. The Elections Act number 24 of 2011 in Section 3 creates the right to vote for every Kenyan adult. Section 4 of the same act makes it mandatory that the register of voters shall comprise, amongst others, a register of voters residing outside Kenya. The Constitution at Article 16 gives the provisions of dual citizenship. Despite these provisions, the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission has in the past 2 elections since the passage of the Constitution 2010 have not made enough efforts to have Kenyans in diaspora registered to vote. Now, nothing stops the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission from having a returning officer in each of Kenya's foreign missions and embassies abroad, albeit periodically or even through secondment, to deal with the issue of diaspora voter registration, apart from their ineptitude and lack of the ability to think without the box. Now, having highlighted the foregoing, as the United Government Party would like to say the following. Number one, we recommend that the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission, together with the Parliament of Kenya, amend the definition of the identification document in the Elections Act to read, and we quote, means a Kenyan national identification card or a Kenyan passport or a Kenyan national identification waiting card considered together with the person's biometrics. Now, we'd like to explain. The Elections Act says that for you to vote, you require something called an identification document. And that identification document has been narrowly defined in the Elections Act as either being a national identity card or the Kenyan passport. We have read through the Registration of Persons Act, Section 5, which requires that for you to be registered as a Kenyan citizen, you need to provide your personal details. And those personal details includes, among other things, something called a personal number. So the only test that young Kenyans need to satisfy is the fact that you have taken the initiative and registered and been given something called a registration number. Now, you understand the provisions of Section 9A of the Registration of Persons Act, as amended in 2018, creates the provision of something called a National Integrated Identification System. That particular identification system carries biometrics, personal details of the person, and every other thing. So our question and concern as the United Agreement Party is that we're requesting that the interpretation of the word called identification document for purposes of voting and registration becomes the young people who have something called a waiting card, because that waiting card has their registration number together with their biometrics. Because there's nothing else that stops them from voting. They've been registered as persons who are living in Kenya. So the malfeasance of a registrar or the malfeasance of an officer of immigration cannot and should not violate the right of young Kenyans to vote, especially when they've taken the initiative to be registered as Kenyans and to be given the ID card, which the law says should be done and be given within 30 days. The second thing we're saying is that we recommend that the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission finds innovative means to spread the ongoing voter registration to all embassies and foreign missions to enable the Kenyans diaspora register as voters and participate in the August 2022 elections. Now, we said earlier that Article 16 of the Constitution creates something called dual citizenship. That means a Kenyan who lives in diaspora, whether he is a citizen of any other country, has the right to be the Kenyan citizen. They have the right to exercise that very vote on August 2022. In the previous elections, the 2017 elections, we know for a fact that IEBC only tried to register voters who live in diaspora in the East African community. As a party, we are saying there's nothing that stops the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission from having returning officers in Kenya's embassies and missions abroad. Many Kenyans are seconded to the various missions and foreign diplomacies, and it is possible for IEBC to have a returning officer in every of those polling, make all those embassies and foreign missions polling centers, and have returning officers who are attached or members of the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission. Number 3, we'd like to state that as a United Government Party, we are going to file a class action suit on behalf of all the Kenyan youth who, as of today, the 4th of October, 2021, have registered within the meaning of Section 5 of the Registration of Persons Act, Cap 107 laws of Kenya, and have not received the identification cards in 30 days as anticipated by the law in Section 9. Now, we said it clearly that the only thing that the young people in Kenya should have done is to present themselves to a registration officer and provide their personal details, which they have done. And within 30 days, the Kenyan authorities should be identifying or issuing them with this thing called identification card. And the reason why it is important, that one, this thing called identification card, which is also something very colonial, one is supposed to give you the chance to vote, to be employed, and number 3, to access other services. So the young people have done their part, and we will be going to court to ask why this particular thing cannot be delivered on the part of the young Kenyans who have delivered their part. And number 4, we'd like to warn the Register of Persons from the selective and discriminative distribution and issuance of identification cards in government's perceived strongholds of interest to the disadvantage of other parts of the country, with a view to unfairly tilting the 2022 vote. You know, governments sometimes are very cunning. And you will see that right now, for example, this particular government will wake up and try to roll out identification card issuance in particular parts of the country, where they, for example, perceive will tilt the elections, the results in the way they would like. We'd like to warn that this kind of activities will not make the next year's elections credible and fair. So the United Government Party would like to appeal to the youth of Kenya who have acquired identification cards. Please go out in your graduation gowns from today, in your overalls, in your tape measures, whatever you have in hand that shows that you're jobless. Please register as you dramatize youth unemployment and that the youth in Kenya need jobs. The United Green Movement Party also requests that in the same dress style or in the same way that you appear for registration today, please remember to appear like that on election day. We must dramatize to this government and the subsequent governments the problems of youth unemployment. And you must also exercise your right to vote in a manner that it helps you deliver on youth employment. We'd like to encourage the unemployed youth to make their votes count. Avoid mass hysteria of hollow promises from politicians. Exercise your judgment and use your vote decisively for the cause of youth unemployment. Do not use the same old cliche that I will not vote because it does not matter. Voting matters. It gives jobs. It keeps Kenya from being indebted. It protects Kenya's environment and gives us a strong economy. Register in this segment and use it to help for your cause of your employment in 2022. Lastly, as a party, we will ensure that as many youth as possible register as voters. 1, through the class action suit that we are going to just file. Number 2, we'll conduct voter mobilization exercises, and by pushing Parliament and the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission to amend the law, amongst others, to have as many youth as possible registered as voters. Thank you. God bless Kenya.